The siren screamed louder than anything anyone had ever heard inside San Quentin State Prison. It cut through the air like a knife. Inmates dropped to the ground. Guards shouted orders that no one could hear. Smoke rose from the far end of the yard as men ran in every direction, slipping on concrete, crashing into each other, panic spreading faster than fire. This was not a fight. This was a riot. A full prison riot at San Quentin State Prison, California, USA, one of the most feared, most tense prisons in America. Men from Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco were clashing all at once. Old gang lines vanished, then reappeared sharper than ever. Fists, improvised weapons, and raw fear ruled the yard. High above, guards in towers aimed weapons downward. Orders were given. Time slowed. Then a loud bang echoed. The riot crossed a line it could never uncross. And as chaos swallowed San Quentin, one terrifying question hung in the smoke-filled air. Would this prison survive the night? Hours earlier, San Quentin had felt tense, but normal. If anything inside San Quentin could ever be called normal. The prison sits beside the water in Northern California, close enough to see the bay, close enough to hear traffic, but completely cut off from the world. It is one of the oldest prisons in the United States, and for decades, it has carried a heavy name. Death row. Riots. Gangs. Fear. San Quentin was never just a prison. It was pressure, stacked on pressure, year after year. Inside its walls lived men from California's biggest cities. Inmates from Los Angeles brought street rivalries. Men from Oakland carried their own codes. Prisoners from San Francisco added another layer of tension. They were locked together. They were not meant to forget who they were. And they never did. One man who felt this every day was Anthony Miller. Anthony was not on death row, but he lived close enough to feel its weight. He had arrived at San Quentin years earlier from Oakland. He knew how prisons worked. He knew how gangs worked even better. At San Quentin, gangs did not sleep. They controlled phones, food lines, and sometimes even peace itself. You learned fast who you could stand next to and who you couldn't. Anthony kept his head down. He worked his job. He stayed alert. That was how you survived. But San Quentin was different. The prison held men waiting to die. That alone changed everything. Every execution added pressure. Every execution reminded inmates that life could end suddenly, quietly, with paperwork and witnesses. That knowledge broke some men. It made others dangerous. On the morning of the riot, the prison felt tight. Anthony noticed it during count. Guards were serious. Inmates were quiet in a way that felt wrong. Something had happened. Word traveled fast through whispers and looks. A fight the night before. A death row inmate moved suddenly. A rumor about an upcoming execution. No one knew the full truth. But everyone felt the same thing. San Quentin was building toward something. The yard opened late that day. When inmates stepped out, Anthony noticed the mix immediately. Men from Los Angeles near men from Oakland. Men from San Francisco standing too close to old enemies. This was a mistake. Or worse. Anthony backed toward a wall, trying to disappear. He saw faces he hadn't seen in months. Men who shouldn't have been near each other. Across the yard, two groups stared each other down. No guards moved. No orders were shouted. The silence felt heavy. Then someone threw the first punch. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a sudden movement. That was enough. The yard exploded. Anthony turned and ran, but bodies slammed into him. Someone fell. Someone screamed. The noise rose fast, shouts, curses, metal clanging. Guards rushed in late. Too late. More inmates joined. The riot spread like fire jumping from group to group. Men who hadn't planned to fight were forced to choose sides. Anthony felt a blow hit his back. He stumbled forward. Another inmate grabbed his shirt, then disappeared into the chaos. Smoke began to rise near the fence line. The siren screamed. San Quentin was officially out of control. This was not the first riot in the prison's history. But it felt different. Because San Quentin was already stretched thin. Because death row was full. Because gangs were stronger than ever. And because the prison was holding men who had nothing left to lose. Anthony dropped to the ground as a loud bang echoed. He covered his head, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Somewhere nearby, a guard shouted. Another bang followed. The riot froze for half a second. Then panic doubled. Inmates rushed away from the sound. Guards flooded the yard. Orders finally cut through the noise. Slowly, painfully, the riot was crushed. Men were cuffed on the ground. Blood stained the concrete. Sirens continued to wail. San Quentin locked down. Hard. Cells slammed shut across the prison. Doors echoed like thunder. The air smelled of smoke and sweat and fear. Anthony sat on his bunk, shaking. He had survived. But he knew this riot would change everything. Because riots at San Quentin never ended cleanly. They left scars. They brought investigations. They brought retaliation. And they always woke up old ghosts. That night, the prison did not sleep. Guards walked non-stop. Inmates whispered through vents. Names were spoken again. Los Angeles, Oakland, San Francisco. City lines hardened. Death row sat silent but heavy, like a shadow pressing down on every cell. Anthony stared at the wall, listening to distant footsteps. He knew what came after riots. Punishment. Pressure. More violence. And as San Quentin settled into uneasy silence, one truth became clear. This prison was not calming down. It was becoming even more tense. And the worst part was still coming. The lockdown after the riot did not end the next day. It did not end the day after that. At San Quentin State Prison, the lockdown stretched on, long and heavy, like a storm that refused to pass. Cell doors stayed shut. The lights never fully turned off. The air felt thick, as if fear itself was trapped inside the walls. 4 inmates, time slowed down. 4 guards, time rushed forward. Anthony Miller sat on his bunk, staring at the concrete wall. The sound of the riot still echoed in his head, the shouting, the running, the siren, the bang that froze everything. He did not know exactly what had happened in that moment. He only knew it had been serious. Serious enough to change the prison. Meals came through the slot in his door. Cold food. No talking. No movement. Guards walked the tier slowly, keys rattling, radios whispering. Anthony listened to the prison breathe. He heard coughing. Shouting. Someone crying late at night. Someone laughing for no clear reason. San Quentin was under pressure again. And pressure always found a way out. The riot was already being talked about outside the prison. Anthony knew this because guards talked too. Not loudly, but enough. News vans. Questions. Reports. San Quentin had a long history of riots. Everyone knew that. But this one involved gangs from Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco all at once. That made it bigger. That made it dangerous. Inside the prison, blame moved fast. Inmates blamed guards for mixing groups. Guards blamed inmates for refusing to follow rules. Administrators blamed unforeseen circumstances. But inside the cells, the truth felt simple. Too many angry men. Too many old rivalries. Too much death too close. Anthony thought about death row often during the lockdown. Even though he was not there, he felt its weight. Death row sat like a shadow over San Quentin. Everyone knew it was there. Everyone knew executions had happened there for decades. Executions changed people. Anthony remembered his first week at San Quentin years ago. He had heard the buzzer for an execution for the first time. The sound had made his stomach turn. Men around him had gone silent. Some prayed. Some laughed. Some stared at the wall for hours. That was San Quentin. You lived next to death. After the riot, the administration made changes. Or at least they said they did. New rules were announced over the loudspeaker. Yard time would be limited. Groups would be separated. Searches would increase. Transfers might happen. Inmates listened quietly. They had heard it all before. When the lockdown finally eased, movement returned slowly. One tier at a time. One group at a time. Guards were everywhere. More than usual. Anthony stepped out of his cell for the first time in days. The hallway felt strange. Too bright. Too quiet. Other inmates avoided eye contact. Everyone was measuring everyone else. This was the low part. The waiting part. Anthony went to the showers under heavy watch. He felt exposed standing there, water hitting his back, knowing fights often happened in places like this. But nothing happened. Not yet. Yard time came back in short blocks. When Anthony stepped outside, the air felt colder than before. He noticed how the groups were arranged. Los Angeles on one side. Oakland on another. San Francisco spread thin between them. The lines were sharper now. Anthony stood near the fence, watching guards watch inmates. The guards looked tired. Some looked angry. Some looked nervous. No one trusted anyone. This was what San Quentin did best. The prison made enemies closer. Over the next few days, small things happened. A shove in the food line. A loud argument in the showers. A fight that guards stopped quickly. Nothing exploded. But everything felt ready to. Anthony heard rumors. Retaliation was coming. The riot wasn't finished. Someone had been hurt badly. Someone might die later. San Quentin had always worked this way. Violence came in waves. The riot had been the high point. What followed was the slow, dangerous calm. One afternoon, Anthony was called out of his cell for questioning. A guard escorted him to a small room. A lieutenant sat behind a desk. "You were in the yard during the riot," the lieutenant said. Anthony nodded. "Did you see who started it?" Anthony shook his head. "It happened fast." "That was true." The lieutenant studied him. "Any names you want to share?" Anthony knew the real question. Anthony said nothing. After a long pause, the lieutenant nodded and waved him away. That silence cost Anthony something. Back in his unit, inmates looked at him differently. Word spread fast. He had been questioned. That was enough. At night, Anthony heard whispers again. Names. Cities. Gangs. Los Angeles wanted payback. Oakland wasn't backing down. San Francisco felt trapped between them. The prison was splitting itself apart. Death row added another layer to the fear. Rumors spread that an execution date might be announced soon. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. Just the idea was enough. Executions brought out the worst in San Quentin. Anthony saw it in men's eyes. The hopeless ones became quiet. The angry ones became reckless. The leaders became more active. Gangs met in silence, through looks and timing. Guards noticed it too. Officer James Carter had worked at San Quentin for over a decade. Anthony had seen him many times. Carter was strict but fair. After the riot, Carter looked older. Carter walked the yard one afternoon and stopped near Anthony. "Stay out of trouble," Carter said quietly. Anthony nodded. It wasn't a threat. It was advice. That night, the prison erupted again. Not a riot. A stabbing. It happened in a housing unit far from Anthony's. The alarm screamed. Lockdown was ordered instantly. Doors slammed shut. Anthony sat on his bunk, heart racing. This was the cycle. Riot. Lockdown. Release. Retaliation. The stabbing made everything worse. Now there was blood tied directly to the riot. Now there was a score to settle. Guards moved fast after that. Searches increased. Cells were torn apart. Mattresses were cut open. Weapons were found. But not enough. The gang stayed ahead. Days passed. Weeks blurred together. San Quentin stayed tense. No executions happened, but death row remained heavy. Anthony noticed something else too. Transfers. Inmates from Los Angeles arrived. Then more from Oakland. The prison was shifting people around, trying to manage space, trying to control damage. Instead, it mixed things more. Anthony was moved to a different unit. No explanation. Just orders. New unit. New faces. New risks. His new cell neighbor was quiet, older, from San Francisco. The man had been through riots before. He didn't talk much. "San Quentin never learns," the man said one night. "It just repeats." Anthony believed him. The next yard release felt wrong from the start. Anthony could sense it. The spacing. The looks. The silence. Guards watched closely, but there were too many inmates. Someone shouted a city name. That was enough. The fight exploded fast. Not a full riot, but bigger than a normal fight. Groups rushed each other. Guards ran in shouting. Anthony backed away, heart pounding. He didn't want to be caught in it again. Batons swung. Orders were screamed. The fight was stopped before it spread too far. But everyone knew. This was building. Later that night, Anthony heard a voice through the vent. Next time, the voice said, "It won't stop." Anthony lay awake, staring at the ceiling. San Quentin was not calming down. The riot had cracked something open. Executions, death row, gangs from Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco, all of it was pressing together inside one aging prison. The administration could slow it. They could not stop it. Anthony felt it in his bones. Another riot was coming. And when it did, San Quentin would face its most dangerous test yet.